Greetings, everybody. This is Leviathan here, and today I'd like to discuss the new set for the Demon Hunter. It's called Gears of Dreadlands, the God Demon Hunter, if you will. Available for testing right now on the PTR patch 2.6.9. Came out yesterday. We spent a few hours doing some mechanics testing, some gameplay testing, things like that. So I'll have some gameplay video for you kind of in the middle of this review slash feedback. And then I'll also be discussing how the set works, some of the mechanics we figured out. As you can see, I have some notes on screen from our stream yesterday, and there'll be a link to those notes. I did a tweet that you can sort of see the notes on your own if you want to take a closer look. That'll be in the video description. Any interesting links and things will be in the video description. But also at the top of this video, I just want to say I would love to hear from you guys in the comments if you've tested the set, if you have any sort of suggestions or thoughts, just anything that could provide some good feedback, because hopefully we can affect some change. Because I would say that right now the set, it's okay, it has potential still, I think, but it definitely has come in a bit underwhelming, and I think we need clarity on not only like how the playstyle should be, if we haven't found the ideal one yet, but just, you know, which direction it's going to go in, then how we can improve it to really fit that fantasy if that's the direction it should go. So I say all that. The way I'll organize this is we'll talk about the actual powers of the set, some of the stuff that we've learned now that we've tested interactions and gotten our hands on it, and then perhaps some improvements or just thoughts or ideas surrounding some of the scenarios that we ran into. So first and foremost, let's just hit the two-piece. It reads, gain a momentum stack when attacking with a primary skill. Simple enough. Each momentum stack lasts 2 seconds at a maximum duration of 10 seconds. I think that to everybody just still reads really confusingly. I'm not sure how you could improve it or fix it, but if you look at our notes, what we're trying, what we found that it means is that whenever you attack and hit an enemy with a primary skill, you get a stack of momentum. That's a 2-second stack, and as you continue to attack those enemies and hit them with that particular primary skill, you will get additional stacks on top that go up to 5 stacks, 10 seconds essentially. And each stack is sort of like its own independent thing on an independent timer. But as you continue to attack, you're basically replacing old stacks with new ones that have the fresh 2-second duration. I'm sure even that doesn't sound all that straightforward, but this is probably a good opportunity to talk about one of the things that we ran into instantly, which was whenever we tried a multi-primary skill build. So for instance, if you wanted to incorporate entangling shot and using the new Odyssey bow, there's a terrible interaction at the moment where if you switch from one primary skill to another, it just automatically cancels out any momentum stacks that you've gained thus far. To me, I don't know if that's intended or if that's how they want it to work. It just doesn't promote using multiple primary skills, and so to me that feels bad. And the most simple solution that we thought of was to take the momentum stacks off of linkage to each primary skill and instead just have it be its own overall buff that's tracked, but any primary skill that you use can build up those stacks. So instead of, you know, if I wanted to debuff everything with entangling shot and then shoot out a hungering arrow and go into strafe, and I would hope I would still have 10 seconds, the reality of how it works right now is that as soon as I fired off that hungering arrow, I completely canceled out all my momentum stacks I built up on entangling shot, and I basically have like 1 stack 2-second duration as I'm going into strafe, which is not good. So if you do it the other way that we suggested, then you would, even after shooting that hungering arrow, have just refreshed the stack, and you should be at 10 seconds if you did enough entangling shots prior, and now you could go into a full strafe rotation. The last part of the 2-piece set is that your primary skills deal 10% more damage per second of momentum. Now, another thing to discuss is the duration itself. A lot of people right now feel like it could potentially be increased to make the stacks more fun or easy to play around, because we'll go into the 4-piece as well, which kind of links this discussion together. But right now, it feels like, especially if you're trying to do like a T16 farming build or something, if you're playing around the duration, it's a very short window after some time, and it makes for a lot of stop and go. I feel like that sort of playstyle, if that's what you want, is fine, but it's likely only going to feel good in pushing GRs. Otherwise, when you're trying to speed, this stop and go just usually doesn't feel great. And you feel it quite a bit in T16, especially when the enemies have particularly low HP or you're one-shotting. It almost creates like this impale situation where the build just doesn't feel like it works correctly. I don't know if that gets solved by, you know, I was talking to Udijo, and one idea he had was to keep the 5 stacks, increase the duration of 1 stack to 4 seconds, and then the overall max to 20. And so that way you can build up a window of 20 seconds of just strafing, which probably would feel a lot better than this 10-second one right now. Another thought that one of the people in my stream had yesterday was that you could create a legendary power that would allow your momentum stacks to essentially never decay. Like once you built it up to 20 seconds, it would just be at 20 seconds. And I felt like that was interesting because you're now adding in a legendary power, so you're sacrificing something, whether that's in your Kanai's Cube or equipped on gear. It's a great benefit, but you are going to have to trade some piece of your build out in order to do so. So that could be another way to potentially approach it. And I think it would definitely make T16 farming with the build feel better. So you can just like strafe essentially for forever, which I think some people want to do. But again, like I was mentioning at the top, it really depends on what the developers intend for the playstyle. It does seem like right now they're promoting this sort of back and forth between moments where you're stationary and firing off your primaries, and then moments where you're moving around with strafe and also still firing off primaries. The reason that this occurs is the 4-piece, which you can see now. Strafing against enemies, when they say against, that basically means you must be hitting it or nearby an enemy, will automatically shoot your last used primary skill if you have momentum. And that's the reason why the whole duration thing comes into play, because once you run out of momentum, you no longer shoot your primary skills. Strafe also gives you a 60% damage reduction while strafing and for 5 seconds after. This part, the defense, doesn't have an indicator, and I think that's terrible. We need to be able to see our defense buffs pretty much at all times. And so obviously while we're strafing, we know, okay, we have 60% damage reduction, but when we're outside of strafing and, you know, they're pushing us towards that by having this stack up this momentum again, we'd like to know how close am I to dropping off that defensive buff. You know, is my 5 seconds about to run out? Because you're going to become very vulnerable at that point. So an icon, a buff tracker for the defense definitely needs to be added. And then the last part here is while strafing, you move faster from momentum. Very generic, doesn't tell you the exact percent. We were trying to figure it out on stream yesterday, and we kind of came to the conclusion that it's 16% per stack, a very random number. But if that's what it is, just say that. So, say while strafing, you move 16% faster per stack of momentum. And now you know. There is a similar interaction on the Patterns of Justice set for the Monk, and it tells you exactly how much percent movement speed you get from your stacks of Sweeping Wind. So there's already precedent for this. I hope they would update that so the set just reads more clearly on its face as to what benefits you get. Some mechanics in terms of strafing. I didn't test every single mechanic. I didn't test every single interaction. There's a lot of people out there testing, so hopefully between all of us it'll get covered. But one thing we did find out, which is good, is that while you strafe and you have momentum and your primary skills are coming out, the primary skills actually generate hatred, which is great because that will allow you to essentially get into a state where you could strafe forever purely from the primary skills being generated by the strafe. But it does seem like there are some broken interactions. I was talking to Adijo again, and for instance, one thing he mentioned was that the simplicity strength healing that you should get from the primary skills doesn't seem to work when your primaries are coming out of strafe. That's obviously very bad because trying to push the build in high tiers, you need a lot of survivability, and losing a significant amount of healing like you would get from the simplicity strength gem is significant. So that certainly needs to be looked at, and there's other interactions similar to that need to be looked at as well. There's also some issues apparently on the piercing with Hungering Arrow and the new the update to the power on the quiver, the Siri Satchel. I'm not exactly sure what's correct there, but it looks like it essentially just guarantees 1 pierce, and then after that you're beholden to the percent of the actual skill. So it's like 35% at base, and there's one rune that increases it to 50%, I believe. So I don't know if that's how that's supposed to work. And apparently when you're strafing and your primary Hungering Arrows are coming out, there's just like no first guaranteed pierce at all. Like there's a broken interaction there. So again, I would just ask for more clarity, I suppose, on how the devs intend for some of these powers to work, or even like the playstyle or whatnot. They don't have to dictate it, but I guess just what their ideas are would be useful. And then I guess just to round out the set, the 6-piece set bonus is that your primary skills deal 10,000% more damage. I'm sure that's just a placeholder. They put a number in there so the set does some damage. Right now, everyone is kind of feeling that it's underwhelming, both from an offense and a defensive perspective. Obviously, we haven't found the best builds yet. But for instance, the UE set, which is, it's been touched so many times, it's kind of a well-tuned set at this point. People are getting the best results with some of the new primary skills and the updates to some of the items supporting those from UE, which I guess is fine, but hopefully we wouldn't have this new set come in and then everyone just plays the sort of play style it suggests in a different set completely. It kind of be like when Whirlwind first came in for Barb with the Wrath of the Waste, and everyone just did it in IK. And that was pretty bad. So that's kind of the set in totality. I'll switch over to some gameplay that I have queued up here from the stream. Go ahead and take these notes down as well. And you can basically see sort of how we were putting some of the builds together. This is a Bolas one. And, it plays fine. I enjoyed the playstyle for the most part. It did feel a bit clunky trying to keep the momentum stacks going while you're strafing, and perhaps that's not even the way you're supposed to play it. I saw some suggestions from Echo Hack that was stating maybe the way to play it is to actually just sit still and shoot your primary skill primarily, and then you only really go into strafe to refresh your defense, to proc the other side of focus and restraint, and then to move throughout the rift, with the increased movement speed to get to the next, pull or pack of stuff or whatever. That's why I'm like, well, how are we supposed to play this exactly? Should we be strafing all the time? Does that make sense? The 4-piece, one other part to mention, is that the primaries from the 4-piece right now do not proc the 2-piece. So that's why you do have these moments of, if you strafe forever and you don't cast out a primary skill, you will run out of momentum, which eventually actually kind of like literally applies. You run out of momentum. You have to rebuild up your momentum again in terms of making the builds and all the damage come together. So yeah, I guess I'll end it here. I didn't want to go on a diatribe or a tirade for too long. That's some of my feedback. There's certainly a lot more to be had. Like I mentioned, I did want you guys to hop into the comments and let us know what your thoughts are on the setup so far, just the powers, the interactions that you've tested, what you would do to improve or change the build. I'd love to just read a bunch of different stuff and see where your guys' heads at, where your ideas are at, and maybe we can see if there'll be a second pass on the PTR and hopefully some changes that come to this, because again, it could be fun. There could be a good playstyle here. There could be some good versions of this, but it's definitely in a rough spot at the moment and needs some help. So I want to thank you guys for watching this video. Hope you found it informative. I hope you found some of my thoughts interesting or inspiring. And I will see you in the next video. Don't forget to subscribe so that you can see more content as it comes to the channel. This is Leviathan, and I'm out of here for now. Peace.